Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, clap your hands once. Oh, that was really weak. If you can hear me, clap your hands twice. All right, if you can hear me, stand up and move closer to the front of the room because a lot of you are really far away. This is a small gathering and we have a giant room, and I promise if you come closer, you'll be warmer. A little bit closer for those in the back. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kim Gilsdorf, and I'm with FSG, which is a nonprofit consulting and research firm. And I am so thrilled to be here today because my colleague Ellen Gardner from the Schultz Family Foundation and I have the opportunity to share with you some of the research we've been doing to bring youth voice to the employment conversation. And, this is the first time we've shared any of this publicly. There's no publication on it yet. It's not available online. And the reason we wanted to share it with you all first is because we need you to help us think about how to frame it to the field and what to do with the research. And so as part of that, we're going to have, for the flow of the day, Ellen and I are going to talk a little bit about the research, and then we're going to have 4 of the OYIF young leaders help us interpret the research and think about what it means and what we should do with the information. And then we're going to have a surprise guest, Marie Davis from the 100,000 Opportunities Initiative. Say hi. Who's going to react to the research from the perspective of an employer. So we're really going to have a youth-employer conversation where we explore, okay, this is what youth are saying about jobs. What do we do with that information? So that's our plan for the day. And I'm going to turn it over to Ellen. We're going to introduce ourselves in a fun way.
Thanks, Kim. And before I introduce myself, I'm just wondering if folks can tell us quickly who's in the room, just so we know who we're talking to. So if you represent a direct service provider, would you raise your hand? Okay. And what about if you are in the private sector? Awesome. And what if you are, let's see, a foundation, a philanthropy? Okay. Anybody else? Government? Great. And any, we know some young people. Any other young people in the room? So you can raise your hands both times then. And anybody else I missed? Yes. Higher ed? Intermediary. Excellent. All right, well, that's just really helpful for us as we think about how to talk about all this. My name is Ellen Gardner. I'm a program officer at the Schultz Family Foundation. I lead a lot of our work that focuses on investing in youth employment, and we're based in Seattle. And Kim and I thought we could kick this off by talking about what our first jobs were, because that's what the focus of this presentation is going to be. And I guess my original first job was babysitting in the neighborhood, but then I was a sandwich artist at Sub Shop.
And my first job was, the first one I got paid for at least, was at a bagel store. It was a local bagel shop where I, was a cashier and I made the coffee. And after a while, they were like, you should just make the coffee because your bagels are not turning out too well. But other than that, it was a good experience.
Awesome.
Oh, and do we have a clicker for the slides?
Was that this? Oh, no.
On the podium?
Is
Is it this? Awesome. Wonderful. There you go.
Okay, great. Let me just grab this. Does this one work? Okay. So I'm just going to talk quickly about why we at the Schultz Family Foundation decided to fund this research and think that it's really important. And I should say that we didn't fund it alone. We work with the Walmart Foundation, who co-funded it, and then obviously FSG and Hart Research did the work. We've just been supporting it and are so thrilled to do so. But I think the main reason that we did was that we really haven't heard from Opportunity Youth, young people, about their perceptions on employment since 2011. And I don't know if you can see it up there, but that's the Opportunity Road report. And since then, since 2011, a lot of stuff's happened. So we just heard at lunch the whole history of the Opportunity Youth Incentive Fund, and then the various other, I would say, friends in the field that we've been connecting to through this network. And so there's been a ton of momentum in a very quick, short period of time in the field. But we really hadn't heard from young people about what they need out of employment in what I would say was a rigorous, thoughtfully researched way since 2011. So we really thought it was time. And then the other piece is that we've heard, and I think we've heard themes through today already, that employers are increasingly interested in this topic. And I think in some of the work I do, I've heard them be increasingly interested about what young people want out of a job. I was in a session earlier today, and I see some faces who were also in that session, and we heard from an employer who mentioned that their turnover rates cost them $54 million a year. And so employers are thinking long and hard about how they can be better places for young people to work. It'll save them money. It'll make them have a more productive, happy workforce. And so we wanted to help employers think about what some of those values and expectations young people have for them are. The other piece is that the Schultz Family Foundation is a founding member of the 100,000 Opportunities Initiative. And Marie, I'm sure we'll talk more about this when we bring her up here, but we work with 53 companies every day who are asking what young people want out of work, and then Marie's job and our job in supporting Marie is to help those companies make changes within their own practices and policies to answer the needs of opportunity youth. So we wanted to make sure we had the data and really understood what young people are looking for. I'm going to pass it over to Kim, who will tell you how we got that information.
Thanks. Well, as Ellen said, we really wanted to talk to Opportunity Youth about employment, and that phrase kind of sounds like an oxymoron, right? Because I guess, technically speaking, Opportunity Youth are those who are out of school and out of work, right? So what happens once you connect to work? So what we did was we said, let's talk to young people who are connecting to work, but it isn't always working out for them. There's a lot of young people across the United States who are connecting to entry-level jobs, and then maybe they get fired, or they get treated poorly, or the job just isn't worth it. They're not getting enough hours to make it make sense. So what we did is we surveyed or interviewed or held focus groups with 1,200 young people across the United States. And we did that in rural areas, in urban areas, in suburban areas. And we talked to about 25% of the young people we talked to were out of school and out of work when we talked to them, but actively looking for a job. Another 30-odd% had just found an entry-level job, but were just trying to figure out how it all worked. And then the last third had just found an entry-level job and were also going to school. In some cases, they're in high school. In other cases, they're in a community college or trying to get a 4-year degree. The other thing we did is we tried to match the demographics of who we spoke with Opportunity Youth, what we know from Measure of America or the Opportunity Index about who Opportunity Youth are and where they live. And so for any of you data nerds, I'm totally happy to go into that in more detail later, but I'll just say for now we tried to say, let's interview people who represent Opportunity Youth but are getting connected to work and ask them, what's that experience like for you? So, after we decided to do this, we asked some of the same questions that were asked back in 2011, which were, what do you think about the future? How do you feel about it? What do you think about employment, your jobs today? How do you feel about opportunity in America or in the United States? And what would you change? If you could change anything about your workplace today, what would you change? And so I think the thing that continues to blow us away and inspire us is how resilient and optimistic young people are, right? So in 2011, 73% of the young people that were interviewed said they were somewhat or very confident about their future. Well, that's exactly the same today. Young people continue to be resilient and optimistic. And one cool thing is that when you connect young people to work and school, they're far more optimistic. And you can see on the left here, when young people are unemployed, 67% are pretty optimistic. But once you get them employed and back in school, 84% feel like, yes, I can make the future work. That all being said, it's one thing to be optimistic. It's another thing to know exactly how to move down the path towards whatever it is that you want to do. And so when we ask young people if they were in a job that could help them make their way to the future that they envisioned, the vast majority said no. I'm in a job that's just getting me by. And I keep on going back to this young woman that was in one of our Chicago focus groups. She's 19 years old. She's a single mom. Her name is Teresa. And we asked her, what her dreams were, and she wants to go to college. She wants to provide a better life for her daughter. She wants to, work in an administrative position in an office. And the best thing that she can find is working in Subway. And we asked her, well, do you think Subway could be a pathway to a career? And she laughed at us, appropriately perhaps. And she was like, who wants to work at Subway for the rest of their life? Maybe if they gave me shares, or I could own stock, or I could do something meaningful. But what is Subway doing for me? And to us, I think that's an important question for us to flip back to, not to pick on Subway, or any other employer. What are you offering besides, just a way to get by? And it's interesting because this isn't on this slide, but it matters to employers because for the 28% that saw it as a stepping stone, their current job as a stepping stone, or for the small percentage, 7%, that saw it as a career, they are twice as likely to stay in their job as people who see it as a way to get by. And that makes sense, right? That's intuitive for all of us. But I think maybe employers haven't connected those dots. So if their current job isn't a stepping stone, then how are they going to get to the future that they want? And this was a really kind of tough question for young people to answer. Something that discouraged me about the research was that only 11% of the people that we talked to knew about community-based organizations or nonprofits as ways to connect to employment. So that means that almost 90% of Opportunity Youth that we surveyed don't know about the organizations that work with you and I every day to connect young people to jobs. And almost 60% said, yeah, it'd be really hard for me to find a good job if I had to, whether that's something I'm looking for now because I'm unemployed, or whether it's something I'd have to find in the future. And finally, young people are discouraged about education, or let me put it differently, less people see education in their future now than they did when they imagined themselves several years ago. Because when we said, how many of you always planned to go to college? That was almost 60% or over 60%. But when we asked, how many of you intend to now complete a four-year degree? It was less than 30%. So there's been some experiences along the way that, and I think you all know this, that have discouraged young people from feeling like they can make a path forward. And partially that's because when you work at Subway, perhaps and I hate to pick on Subway because I don't know what their practices are, but when you work at Subway, they're maybe not telling you hey, I want to help you go to college. You could make a career here. I don't get the impression that's the message that employer is giving. So reflecting on this, we thought, okay, well, what do young people want in a job? How could we create the best entry-level experience? If we know that only 11% of young people are reached by nonprofits, how can we create the best experience for young people? It's going to have to be, in some measure, through work. So what do they want from work? And these things are not going to surprise anyone in the room. Young people want the opportunity to grow. They want to be respected. They want to have flexibility and understanding when personal life circumstances come up, because, let's face it, they do for us all. And they want the opportunity to earn an income that will be sufficient for them. And income isn't just about how much you make per hour, it's about how many hours you get to work, and also about the benefits that you get, right? And I won't dwell long on this slide, but I'll just say that what really struck me is that the number one thing young people are looking for in a job, and it's above income or above anything else, is to be respected. To be treated like adults, to be treated as equals. And obviously that's, I think, one of the strongest assets of OYIF. But it's what young people are looking for in the workplace. So we have to help employers figure out how to create that new culture. Unfortunately, and this is, themes that I think most of you will not be surprised by, most young people aren't finding what they're looking for in their jobs today. And I just want to point out a couple of disparities here that I think are worth noting. So when you think about the theme of growth, white men are 12, almost 13 points more likely to say that they feel like their job is leading them to a career than African American women that we surveyed. And we have to assume that that's in large part due to the messages they're getting from their employers. Another disparity when you think about respect is that women are 10 points more likely to say that they feel like they've been disrespected in the workplace, right? So 50% of women say that they've struggled at work because their manager treated them unfairly or disrespected them, while only 40% of men. And then we also have to think about, well, there's huge majorities of folks who would change behavior if work improved. 83% of respondents said they'd stay in their jobs if they had more control over their schedules, back to the flexibility point. And then when we think about income, it's across the board that folks are looking for a higher income, but it's especially true for students. 71% of students said, yeah, we've really struggled to work and go to school because we have to pay for life and pay for tuition. So when we think about these realities, I think it can feel discouraging, and this is where I keep coming back to our morning plenary session, where we said that young people have the answer, and young people in our local communities have the answer. And that's what's, to me, the most powerful about this research, is that the young people we interviewed and surveyed had really clear recommendations for what they wanted to see change. So I'm going to talk about those 5 recommendations, and then we'll invite up our youth experts to talk about what they think employers can do differently. So here are the 5 changes that young people suggested. First of all, they said employers have to support professional growth. And that isn't just about a career path. Yes, it's great to get promoted at Subway or whatever other employer, Walmart, Lowe's, HMS Host. But it's also important for an employer to support education. And that doesn't have to be, you don't have to be Starbucks and pay for the entire education of someone. It could just be about accommodating their schedule so they can actually make it to school. Second, train frontline managers. And this one really came out clearly, because young people felt like, you know what? If my frontline manager knew what they were doing, if they treated me with empathy, if they understood me, if they listened to me, my work would be so much better. Managers really drive young people's experiences. In fact, they drive all of our experiences. Third, work towards inclusion, not just diversity. So lots of young people talked about diverse environments, but consistently, women and people from underrepresented backgrounds in their environments didn't feel like their voices were heard. Fourth, change scheduling practices. I think probably lots of you know how employers that offer part-time employment will often cut hours or send people home early or change schedules on a week's notice. And that doesn't work for most people because it's not a great way to live your life. And if your hours are fluctuating, you can't predict the amount of income you earn. Which connects to the last one, offer good benefits and wages. There's a reason that the employers that offer health care to part-time employers or part-time employees are some of the most competitive places to get jobs. So, what I love about these 5 recommendations is that they are incredibly practical, right? And all of them are possible. So we have examples of employers who are doing all 5 of these things. And yes, they're in a minority, but they're there and they can do it. And so I felt like this research was really empowering because it's clear what young people want. But it's also a lot of food for thought. Like, we have a lot of interpretation of this data to do. And like I said earlier, we haven't shared it widely. You're actually the first people to see it, so thanks for your patience. And so at this juncture, we'd like to invite up Ryan, Shanice, Felix, and Shanice to help us think about and interpret the data that we've just gone through. So let's give them a round of applause. And then we'll do questions. Thank you. Well, thank you all for being here. Yeah. Let's get started just with introductions because I think, Ellen and I talked about our first jobs and what we do, but you all have been with OYIF for longer than we have, and I think in every case, almost every case, and you have a little bit more context. So Shanice, we heard from you earlier. Would you want to start and talk a little bit about yourself and then also share what your first job was?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Shawnice Jackson. That's Shanice Turner. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I am a community and youth advocate. I currently am a consultant for Opportunity Youth United, specifically around civic engagement in the upcoming elections. My first job, I was a cashier / under the table pharmacy tech at the age of 16. And I'm not going to say the organization because I'm pretty sure I wasn't supposed to be doing that.
Hello? All right. So my name is Felix. I work for Arizona Center for Youth Resources in Phoenix, Arizona. My first job was actually a construction job, and the reason I got it was because of my mom. So it's a pretty different experience for me.
Hi everyone, my name is Shanice Turner. I'm from Atlanta. My first job was a babysitter, but my first proud job was being a Vista with United Way.
I had to ask, was she proud of being a babysitter? That's like a good job. I'm Ryan Dalton. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm a National Council member of the National Council of Young Leaders. I serve on Opportunity Youth United. I work with the Cowan Institute, and I'm the program coordinator for our local community action team. And my first job was sweeping hair at a barber shop and selling candy in school. So. Yes.
We have all come a long way. Great. Well, thank you all for being here. So what we want to start with is just to ask each one of you to provide some of your reflections on the research that I just went through. And I know you've probably had more time to reflect on it than the audience, but yeah, really curious what you saw in the research that resonated, what you saw that maybe you thought doesn't really represent the experiences of the young people that you work with or your experiences. So anyone is welcome to start. Shanice. My apologies, or Shanice, or whoever, yeah.
I'll start since everyone's looking at me. So I felt as though the research was a true, accurate reflection of how young people perceive work versus the true reality once you're out there, in today's economy and the actual workforce looking for a job. The two areas that really stood out for me were the areas around flexibility and growth potentials. I think it speaks volumes to young people. I think it was half of young people struggle to keep jobs because of scheduling, but 83% said they would stay if the job was flexible. I think that says a lot about young people. Young people are seeking opportunities to work, but not just an opportunity, but the right fit for their essentially their life. I know for me, that rang very true. In my last role, it provided me a lot of growth opportunities. I had the potential to go from a fellow to an HR coordinator to an individualized services manager working directly with Opportunity Youth on the ground, and then eventually being promoted to services director, actually coordinating all of those services that would prevent our Opportunity Youth from being in need of emergency services. But then life essentially happened, and I actually had to step out of that position because of a lack of flexibility. So, of course, I show up, young people show up in the workplace as an employer, but an employee, but you also have to take account all of the different hats that young people wear. So yes, I'm an employee, but at the same time, I'm also a caregiver for my 83-year-old grandmother. I'm a breadwinner for my family. I'm a student. I'm a leader. So I also have a lot of other responsibilities that having a flexible work job, is critical to, me being successful in all those areas. So I actually had to leave this position, even though it offered me growth opportunities, to seek something that was more flexible to actually fit my life.
Can I just ask a follow-up on the growth opportunities piece that you mentioned? Were those sort of all outlined in front of you when you showed up on day one? Did that come about because you asked your manager what those were? Was your manager saying, you're doing a great job and I want you to know the path here? Like, how did How did all that happen for you?
I think it was really twofold. One of the things is I'm essentially like a big picture person. So when I went in on my interview on the first day, one of my questions I wanted to know was, what are the opportunities to grow within the organizations? It's really important for me to serve where I know, there's a trajectory for me to grow into a leadership position, into a position that pays me a little more, into a position that offers me more influence within the organization. But it also was, I guess, contingent upon me having ongoing conversation and dialogue with my manager, letting them know, I guess, my goals as a person and, what was important to me and where I saw myself in 3 years and 5 years, and really being intentional about, what do I have to do in order to move into, this realm? What do I have to do? What qualifications, what education do I need to continue to gain in order to move up into a better role?
Thank you. Yeah, both of those comments on growth and flexibility, I think we really heard throughout the research. And, it's interesting what you said about flexibility and growth sometimes being trade-offs. I think that was a theme we heard throughout our focus groups. We've probably all felt that in our careers, but for folks who have extra burdens, like 23, I think, % of the folks that we interviewed are caregivers, like you just mentioned, Shanice, and thank you for bringing that up. And so they have to balance those demands. And I think oftentimes frontline managers, and this is why we needed that frontline manager training, aren't cognizant or don't think about the demands that are on the shoulders of the young people that work in their companies. So thank you.
I probably can piggyback off of that one. The two things that stuck out to me was growth and income. Growth, just on the other spectrum of what Shanice talked about, growth can look a lot of different ways. How are you growing a person within your company? Are they traveling down the pathway that they want to travel down? Are they kind of, do they have a career is it a career paving position that they're in? Do you know what they want to do? A lot of times, me working with Cafe Reconcile in 2009, I worked with a lot of young people who found like that first job experience as just a stepping stone, as an opportunity, but got them nowhere close to where they really wanted to venture out to. Maybe they wanted to be a chef and they got put in a dish room. Another thing about growth is, I think, the transparency piece. Being transparent about the time frames on growth, being transparent and honest and open up front is a big thing. And to kind of tie that in with the income piece, I think a lot of times we only look at, all right, this is a young person, so we can pay them $9 an hour. But we're not thinking about the breadwinner of the family, or someone with 2 or 3 kids, someone with 1 kid, someone who's taking care of themselves and paying rent, et cetera, or a school financial barrier. And sometimes we just give them those minimum wage jobs and think, all right, yeah, they should be appreciative of getting this job. Like, they should be thanking me. And for them, in the beginning, it's like, yeah, I am thankful, but then that momentum tends to wear off because, one, they're not in the line of their career path. Like, they're not getting any closer to where they want to see themselves in life. And then another thing with the income piece, I think the benefits. A lot of times we talk about school and education being like a barrier to getting employed or getting that position. But sometimes a company can embed like that type of training that speaks directly to a particular position for a person to come in on an entry level and be trained up to suit that position. And another thing with benefits, a lot of our young people don't know about benefits because the jobs aren't offering that up front based on age and not criteria. And we're not given the opportunity to the opportunity to really showcase your life experiences. That makes me think about the 7-second resume. There's things that you go through in life that prepare you for positions that a school can't prepare you for. So I think just creating those spaces is a big deal that we don't focus a lot on, and having companies work with organizations that's already working with the population.
Hi. Respect, income, flexibility, and growth are very important to me, especially the respect piece as a young person. And that comes with not calling me cute, but actually seeing me. Ryan's laughing because he knows it happens to me a lot. Not calling me cute, and seeing me as a young professional, someone who is determined and growing, and not as a, how can I say, an adolescent. Though I have the voice and the size, I am an adult. And I like to be treated as one and as a professional adult who's doing great things in their community. And with the income, as Ryan said and Shawnee said, some of us are breadwinners, or maybe they're power attorneys for their mom because, there needs to be someone who can be there in case the worst case scenario happens. And with income, I feel that since we're young, they try to use the naivety of a young person, especially if you're like positive, optimistic, and you don't really know because you're so excited about this work. And next thing you know, like, whoa, I could have made mad money here. I made a lot of money in this area because guess what? I wasn't acknowledged or even aware of the opportunities that align in this work and that there are money in this work, but it's not presented to us. It's like, hey, you volunteer here. Hey, you volunteer here or there, or come over here, fly there, and thank you. See you next time. And that's one thing I do appreciate about Aspen is that they do take their young leaders into consideration. That goes with the respect, the growth, in an area, all of us young people here, we have this platform to speak, to tell our stories, whether it's 7 seconds or 20 minutes, or possibly an hour, or talking to everyone here afterwards during sessions, because that is something that's important to us. And flexibility, I have meetings sometimes that occur at 9 o'clock in the morning that is dealing with the community that you say you serve. Are you going to give me the time off so that I can do what I'm passionate about, so that I can grow in my community that we are serving together? That's important to me, and it should be important to all of us. And not only that, can you compensate me for my time? Because I'm sure you're receiving comp time. And we need that because that's helping us grow. That's helping us go to our passion. Don't use our youngness, our naiveness, and our passions to use us and say it's volunteering. We paid our dues, and now we're willing to be flexible. We want income, we want growth, and we want to make sure that we get the respect that we deserve.
I'm really so moved by that, Shanice, partially because it occurred to me for the first time when you were talking that giving someone an appropriate amount of income,
Yes.
giving them growth opportunities, and giving them flexibility is a sign of respect. Yeah, and so I really appreciate the way you reframe that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. So this is my first time being up here, so I feel so privileged. But one thing's for sure, that we're talking about growth and flexibility. That's something that through me, I really needed a lot, especially like I have a family, so I am like main focus is trying to get a job at the same time further my education. So I'm always hardworking and committed. And a lot of managers seen that and they appreciate that effort that I put in within my labor, and they give me those opportunities. But most of the time I can't take them because it's off-site, or sometimes they're not gonna pay me to be able to go there, or they're just gonna tell me like it's for training, but they're not gonna be able to compensate me for doing these trainings. So a lot of opportunities that I have had were because of, I'm not sure if I could say the franchise, or I could say McDonald's. If I do, could I get sponsorship or something? At least a Happy Meal, I know, right? Yeah, so McDonald's gave me a good learning experience. One thing's for sure that I do advise a lot of youth is to have communication with their manager. I had a good manager. At first, I'm actually a felon, so when you have to put that in the resume, or when you have to put that in your application, you have to X that in there. And then you have to write, what were you convicted for? And a lot of places, they don't accept felons. So right off the bat, they just overlook that. They just don't look at you no more. And just having that one chance that she gave me the opportunity to get interviewed then and there when I was filling out the application in front of her, that showed me how convinced she was that I was gonna put my effort, that I have changed my life. Like just putting this one application is a step forward for me personally. I was also doing youth build at the time. So managing both, doing youth build from 8 in the morning to 3. Then I had to go work from 5 to like midnight. So it was a big shift for me. And it was the first time that I would have to do something like that. But as I'm maturing, I'm knowing that, I'm going to have to juggle a lot more things. So, I'm still thinking about getting a part-time job, but I'm like, do I have the time for it, So being flexible and being able to communicate, like they were saying, just having that frontline managers that are willing to appreciate their employees and just talking to their employees, just checking in with them. I know most of the time we're all professional. We'd rather send an email and just going to talk to them. Why can't we be traditionalists and just saying, how you doing? Is your day going good? I'm doing great. Thank you for bringing it up, I could probably be going through hell at home, but one thing's for sure, just that one conversation could spark that motivation to keep on making me go to work. Because once you're at work, man, sometimes you feel like, why am I still here? I could probably be getting paid more. I could be doing something better than this. But at the same time, just having that communication and knowing and telling your employees, we all here together, we're working as a collaborative, and this is a team effort. We all have the same vision and the same goal, and that's to help everybody, mostly the youth. That's the targeting group that we have right now. But, for one thing that I would like to say to all the employers is that just being able to know that we are worth a lot. We're probably not getting paid that much, but we are worth a lot. We are sacrificing our time. This is time that we can be investing in bigger things, like watching our family grow. Because this is time that we can be investing in greater things, But one thing's for sure, just showing that appreciation. I think that, like me personally, I love when somebody just says, like, hey, how you doing? I feel like that's just a spark again, like, let's go, let's do this, let's keep on moving forward. So, yeah.
We got to have you do frontline manager training.
I know, right?
Felix, I've got a question. I think both you and Shanice mentioned communication, especially with your managers. And, as someone who is maybe older than you, I think a little bit, I think a lot, I know it's hard to have those conversations with managers. And so I'm wondering for you and Shanice, like how did you get good at talking to managers about what you want and what you need out of a job and what your goals are? And was there anyone that helped you through that or any program that helped you through that? How did you learn to do that?
So I'll probably start this off. I know you've been put on blast too many times. Sorry about that. So one thing's for sure, like, man, when I first applied, they gave me a W-2 form to fill out. I don't know what a W-2 form is. I don't even know how to apply for health benefits. I'm like, so how do I fill this out, And just asking those questions to the employer and the manager, letting them know, like, hey, could I get some of your assistance? And especially since this is our first job, this is like, yeah, we're going to get this job. But then you get this whole packet you have to fill out, like the e-files. And you're kind of new, so you don't know, like, how much you should put in for your taxes, if you should take the less or you should take the most. And especially if we're getting paid less, you want to give less to taxes, and in the end, you have to pay taxes. So just having, like it would be great to be having those life skills somewhere else, before we actually apply. So these are things that we should know before we apply, and how to negotiate. Being able to talk to the manager, and at the same time, you are in an interview, but how can you interview the manager? Yeah. Letting them know, like, hey, you know what, I'm a youth, I'm still working, but would you be able to be flexible with my time? I do have a set schedule. Would you be able to work with this? I know sometimes, employees just quit out of nowhere, and that happened to me a lot, that out of nowhere, my schedule would just change drastically. And I would panic, but I would manage it because I was kind of responsible at that time. But now I'm more accountable now since I've been had to, a lot of people hold you accountable when you're in these positions. So, just being able to communicate. And one thing that I always did was just having short conversations with my manager, like, how's your day, And then, because I know they're always busy. When I got to see the manager, it was when she was running around doing errands, and I know I had her right next to me helping me. I would just talk to her like, hey, so I know it's busy. How's your day going? Like, oh, it's going good. And later on, you build that confidence to just start opening up and letting them know, like, can I be able to change this? How can I be able to benefit from this? And I got the opportunity to move up, but I never took it because I was just focused on my education. I'm like, I love these opportunities you're offering me here, but I want to better myself. I don't want to be here. This is just a stepping stone for me. And that's something that a lot of us get confused. When we hire a lot of our youth, we think we're hiring them for a career. Let this be known. They're just taking this to be able to prosper and to have financial stability. They're not there to be there for 10, 20 years. They're there just to be able to have a moment so they can be able to have money and then pay for their education so they can better themselves. Because I know when I was getting interviewed, I felt like I had to have like a scholarship, or I had to apply with a degree just to get an interview at McDonald's. I'm like, how hard is it to really apply? And it does take a lot of time. It's like a job within a job to be able to get a job. Mm-hmm.
I agree with Felix 100%. I think a lot of what he's talking about is, what goes into building a strong rapport with your manager, and just developing a relationship that's centered around, trust and strong communication. I think going into a position, it's really key for young people as well as their managers to have conversations around, communication styles, leadership styles, management styles, because I think it's really easy to think of like your manager, your boss, and every one of them like all in the same bucket, kind of like one size fits all. But that's just not true. I've had bosses who, like to check in and catch up over food and coffee, and I've had managers who prefer to give me feedback via email, and then we sit down to discuss it. I think trying to establish and really determine how you and your manager best communicate in the beginning is really key.
Thank you, guys. Well, one other question I think we have, you all reflected on what struck you about the research, what you thought was sort of most resonant with you. What was missing? What did we miss in the research?
I'll start again. Something that struck me as being missing is there was nothing really around work that is, impactful or meaningful, or work that provides a purpose. I think that is really, really, really important. Doing work that you enjoy, even if it's something that's, not, I don't feel like I'm changing the world or I'm saving the world, does it get me out of bed in the morning? Is it something that brings me joy? Is it something that's aligned with, my best self? I think those are really, important. I think Shanice and Ryan also touched on that a little bit in the beginning, like having a job where you feel like you're making a difference, you're valued, you're important. I think that is key, and that really struck me as, where is it? Where's the information? Where's the data around this? Because my ideal employee is someone, essentially somewhere where I can be impactful, and somewhere who's going to invest in me, because at the end of the day, I'm investing in them.
Thank you. Yes.
I think some of the barriers to employment was what was left out, and four of the biggest barriers I see in gaining employment or gainful employment is criminal records, education, transportation, and proximity, like where it is. Sometimes the opportunity is like in a whole nother bureau or a whole nother city that you can kind of benefit from, but you can't get to it because maybe you don't have transportation, or maybe it's just not in your city. But it's something that you're passionate about. And I think one thing that we touched on, but it wasn't really reflective in the report, was time and balance, and particularly around people, youth with families. I think that's like the four things that kind of stuck out to me. I just felt like a percentage of the population was kind of left out of the conversation.
It's fine. To me, was that, how can I say, did any of the Opportunity Youth or former Opportunity Youth go through any type of technical programs, like a youth build, a year up, a public allies, or did they go to college, and when they completed college, did it open up a pathway to their career and that they wanted and that they're passionate in pursuing? And I know for me, when I graduated Year Up, it opened up another world to nonprofit. I know I wanted to get paid to help people, but I didn't know that you can actually get paid. I didn't know it was a career path. It was always a passion of mine to help and to serve, and I've always felt led to do that, whether it's helping someone pack up an art project or saying, how can I help you? And this is sign language. This is sign language when you put your thumb in your hand. Like, how can I help you? How can I help you? How can I serve? And how can this service be my mission and purpose?
Yeah, I think they touched a lot of good points. I think it was very good information, no lie. I was kind of astonished. But one thing for sure is that, just being like a head of household, how can we get data on that? Like, a lot of people are caregivers. How can they get information about that, and how can they put that into perspective of data also? One thing's for sure is that I thought it was pretty cool just getting this information, because now I know how to help my youth that I working with. Like, what is it that we can start doing with their resumes? Like, what kind of changes can we do to their resumes, or what can we attach to their resumes? Since we're moving up to more of a technology base, can we use like the QR scan, or put in our business cards within it? Or how can we improve their opportunities of getting hired, or at least just landing the interview? Because I know it just sometimes, I feel like, when you get that mock interview with a peer or somebody like that, it feels good, but it's not the same as you're being under pressure with a real manager. Just once you're there, it's like, oh man, I'm stuttering, I'm scared, I'm nervous, I don't know what to say, or I don't know how I should present myself. And then, some of them don't dress up professionally because we don't know how to present ourselves before the manager the first time around. When we get a job, it's like, a lot of youth do present, but a lot of them are like, well, this is my Sunday clothes. This is the best clothes I got. So it's just a pair of tennis shoes, some jeans, and a T-shirt. And a lot of employers just look at that right away and, nope. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Well, thank you all. I think that's really helpful. And it's interesting, some of the things you brought up, stuff around transportation and head of household, is there in the research, but we didn't bring it out. It's not the whole entire group of people, so I think there's more we can do to explain the research. And then some of the things you brought up, we didn't ask about. I think the stuff that you mentioned, Shanice, about meaning and purpose, we didn't ask about it explicitly. So if there's any funders out there that want to fund more research, you can talk to me later. But, I think that that's really important, and other research we've done has told us how important it is. We should have had this conversation maybe before we did the survey. I want to transition and invite Marie to come up here, because the next thing that I'd love to have you all do is share a recommendation with Marie, who's here representing 53 employers. Woo! I'd love to have you each share a recommendation with Marie around what you think employers, especially entry-level employers, can do differently. And you already all started to get into that. And then we're going to open it up to questions from our really patient and amazing audience. So would anybody like to start with their recommendation?
Anybody?
Sure.
I'm not picking on Shanice.
Sure. So my recommendation is essentially young people don't leave organizations, they leave bosses. So frontline managers have to be able to cultivate strong collaborative work cultures full of rapport and growth opportunities for young people, because we need managers who care about our futures enough to challenge us in real time and hold us accountable. But we also need the training and opportunities to fail and grow successfully while we're actually in those employment opportunities.
I know, that was impressive.
Do I need to say it? I agree. Do you want me to talk about that?
Whatever you want, yeah.
No, I think I was taking so many notes when I was sitting over there. Agree with everything you said, and I will say that there are two pathways that I've seen from employers, and again, this is just from some of my over the last few months, where I did see, I think, all four buckets when it comes to respect and growth, all taking place, and that was two different scenarios. One is if an employer looked at every person that walked through the door as a future manager or a future leader of a company, they wouldn't be looking at just schedule or past experience. They would be thinking to themselves, how can I develop this person better? How can I make sure that the schedule fits, because they are going to be a future leader? And I mean, I did come from Chipotle, and Chipotle does promote 94% of their managers come from within. So I was spoiled in some regards because I was seeing that on a daily basis. I would see managers sit down with somebody that started a week ago saying, what's holding you back from taking on more hours? Are you going to school? They were asking questions right off the bat, and that was the communications part. However, that's one way to do it, where we can reach the respect and the growth and really invest in the beginning of any person's career. But the second part, and I think you had said it, Felix, is that not everybody wants to stay at Chipotle or McDonald's for 10 years. However, another thing that employers can do, and Mod Pizza said this to me when I was visiting with them. They had said to me, listen, we're making pizzas every day. We need people to make pizzas every day. We don't have a lot of growth opportunities at this point. They said, and the HR director said to me, but that doesn't mean we don't want them to leave here better. We want them to leave here in a manager role. We want them to leave here better communicators. So that is, I don't want to say option two, there's plenty more options, but those are two ways that I do see that employers can, one, they can benefit from that. When we talk about retention or recruitment, if you can show a pathway for a person at the company, that's one option, or to show how working at this company can lead to better pathways, I think that's another option. So I agree with you.
And I would add that if you don't train the managers, back to Shanice's point, you can't communicate either of those options.
Exactly. Every manager needs to know that that person sitting in front of them is a potential future leader, or their role is to make them better, no matter what.
Awesome, thank you. Other recommendations for employers?
I think that kind of hit on my recommendation. Just providing that pathway, like making sure that they can see themselves as a leader of the company, or as a leader just in general. I think that's one of the most important pieces, but also when we talk about respect and pay, making sure that they're actually making a living wage. In New Orleans, I think the minimum wage is like $9 or $8.50. And if I live on my own, I'm taking care of myself and the family, it's kind of hard to do that with just one job. So I think the respect of growth, but then also the respect of income as well.
Absolutely. And the more we can learn from youth as well as community organizations from an employer's perspective, employers want to know from those that are working here, working with youth, as well as the youth themselves, what would be holding them back from taking a position. And I have had community organizations say to me, hey, listen, it's listed that Chipotle is paying $10.15 an hour, but somebody else is paying $13.50 an hour. Employers want to hear that from you. I think what I've learned most today is that there's so many more opportunities for collaboration by community organizations and employers and youth. The more that we can get together and talk about income and talk about transportation and not try to solve it on our own, that will be huge for all of us. That's a return on investment for the employers, community organizations, and most of all, the youth.
I always say this, it is a relationship, not a business plan, and you want to treat your young people as important. And to make sure that you're not sending an email because you start that relationship at a distance. You want to bring them closer and treat them as, not as a child, but as someone who's important. I would say even as someone who is your age, when you were their age at one point, so that you can make that resemblance and bring that relationship closer, because we can feel that. We can feel the distance, but we can also feel the warmth.
I was going to say, I definitely agree, and I think that comes to the professionalism, treating everybody that walks through the door as a professional and not somebody filling a schedule. So I agree.
Yay! Okay, so one thing for sure that I kind of do recommend is that just giving them like a leadership opportunity, like challenging them, the youth. Like she was saying, we don't need just a lot of these programs. We just need a good boss or a good team leader, like teaching them or giving them some of these trainings. Like I know like McDonald's was giving some of their employees trainings and also giving them career opportunities, you know, which I thought was pretty amazing that they help them so they can further their education, because a lot of us don't have that kind of funding or have that money.
I agree, and you had just mentioned education, and I think, you know, one thing that I've seen from employers in regards to best practices is that it's not either or. And it's one thing to offer tuition benefits, which many employers do. It's another to teach the employees how to use the benefits and what that actually means, and to put a schedule together that includes education. And I think it goes back to communication, knowing, yes, I'm taking night classes, I'm taking online classes. So I think that's important. And in regards to the listening and the development, you know, as far as special projects or more, you know, responsibility, I think that's something that community-based organizations can ask more of employers in regards to, hey, here's a roadmap on our end as to what will make a youth successful. And it's taking that feedback that way so that employers don't have all the answers at all. And I mean, a coalition of 50 employers, they're all saying to me as well, just tell us what makes the most sense. Just help us, you know, put programs in place or roadmaps in place, and we'll do it because we know the value. We know the value of youth as our future leaders. So I think it's also you coming up with the list, or, you know, what would it take to make you feel more valuable, and getting it into the employer's hands somehow so that we can learn from you and we can build that into, even if it's an orientation system or orientation program, so that you know right off the bat, this is why you're valuable to us, and this is how we want to see you grow.
Thank you. And thank you, Marie, for being brave enough to represent 53 employers up on the stage. We really appreciate it. I want to make sure we have time for questions from our audience. And I also should mention, given this morning's conversation, your comments are welcome and your questions are welcome. So whatever you prefer. But yeah, for any of the young people or for myself, I'll just pass this mic down.
I have a really big voice. I'm going to go ahead and start.
You can start, but I'm almost to you.
This question is for all of you. When it comes time to negotiate either an initial job parameters or at a performance review, do you feel that's an area that you feel confident that you have the skills to do that negotiation, or do you feel that the manager has more knowledge of how to negotiate with you than you have of how to negotiate with them?
I could probably answer that. Sorry about that. So it kind of depends on the youth, because not everybody is knowledgeable of negotiating. So that's kind of like just a situation depending on the youth. There's something you could probably help them with so they can barter, if anything. So you can try to give a good even trade or an exchange where not just a manager will feel that you're just giving them something and you know you can still offer him more, but in return, just knowing like, hey, look, I could offer you this. Would you willing to take it, yes or no? Or just trying to give them those skills, because most of the time we've seen negotiation skills like on CSI, like, oh, bombing, those type of negotiation skills that we are entitled to seeing that we don't really know how to negotiate. Like, how do we negotiate our hour wages? How do we negotiate those health benefits? How can we negotiate these things? So, you know, that would kind of fall under like training or some kind of development for the youth to preparing them for that.
I think a lot of times young people are nervous. They don't know what to expect. And not just young people. We talk about young and old, or young and veteran, and all of that different stuff. But as just an employee, I think the sense is there's 100 more people outside the door, so you're gonna take this or you're not. And that's the truth of it. Like, a lot of times we are nervous to ask for a raise or ask for those benefits or things like that, because you know the data just showed us, we know that there's a whole bunch of other people, some overqualified, some qualified, some not ready, but they're lined up. And I think if we refocus, $54 million on turnover, I mean, like, why not put $54 million on training and educating them to growing in those positions? when you think about it, young people are like the future of work. Nobody can stay in a position over 100 and something years, right? So
It is one of the most called for classes that we teach year up. See, I told you I had a loud voice. Because we support year up grads for their whole career, negotiation is one of the courses asked for over and over again, and we're going to be doing it with 300 year up alumni in a couple weeks in Dallas. And I feel that something that the companies can do is level the playing field a little bit, structure what that performance review is going to look like. You're going to talk about what your accomplishments are. I'm going to talk about what I've seen. We're going to set goals together, and then we're going to talk about where you are in the market pay for the job you do. Not about that you've got a gas guzzling car, but where you see postings in, online for positions like yours. Power comes from you knowing where you sit in the marketplace of pay for what you do. And I just wondered, is that class constantly being asked for because you do feel at a disadvantage when it comes time to negotiate, because the employer has so many more experience, so much more experience, and how can that be something where it's a sustainable assistance? I mean, just saying if you get a job and it's not at the pay rate you were looking for, just saying, this is lower than market is stronger than saying this is lower than what I need, and saying let's revisit this again in 3 months or 9 months or 6 months, and see if you feel like I've worked, and earned that differentiator. We kind of look at it as a one-time deal. You take the job and you're stuck, but bet on yourself, on your performance, and say, can we revisit this again in 6 months? Because I think you're going to want to revisit our number based on what you're going to see out of me. So
Can I add?
It's a great comment and a great question. Someone wanted to add something.
I just want to add to it because I agree with Ryan. I don't necessarily think it's about, age thing. Like, I don't think the question is, do young people need negotiation skills? I think the question is essentially, has this young person had the opportunity to, practice negotiation skills within a professional employment opportunity? And I think that programs like, Year Up, Public Allies, Youth Build that do provide opportunities for young people to, gain and, practice the skill is important. But I also think once you're actually in the employment experience, it's also important. Not to say that young people need ongoing hand-holding when it comes to negotiation, but the workplace, I feel like, is just another opportunity, another platform to continue to grow and hone that skill.
Other questions?
How are hiring, I'm sorry, y'all, I'm pretty loud. How are hiring managers assessing opportunity use skill sets? Are they looking for skills just based on a brick and mortar experience? Like when you look at their resume, are you just looking for a university, a particular school or whatnot? Or do they value the experiences outside of traditional learning experiences? Like interviews, like I know when we do mock interviews with our young people, it's very brief. You probably get the 1 or 2 questions like, hey, can you tell me a time where you were probably like you felt a little weak, but you challenged yourself or something like that. And a young person kind of only focuses often on like experiences within a particular institution. So like how are hiring managers trying, because opportunity youth, the population, they have amazing different type of unique experiences where they are growing in different competencies and different skill sets. So like how are they getting that information outside of like, and we have to also be real, a lot of like big name job offers, like they have systems. Mm-hmm. You don't even get to see the person yet. Yeah. You get your resume through a system and keywords get pulled out, and then that's when you kind of get to that position of, hey, let's do an interview. Yeah. So just like, how are they kind of getting that information from opportunity from those skill sets?
That's such a great question, and Marie and I were just in a conversation about this last week. So do you want to start it off, Marie, and I can add any thoughts?
You got it. Sorry.
I was thinking, my mind was going 1,000 miles a minute when you were saying that, even before last week's program. And I can't speak for, that's something I can't speak for all 53 employers on. However, I will say those employers that are working with Opportunity Youth know they have to do something different. They may not know what yet, because they do know they want to hire. And they want to bring the youth into the system, into their organizations. And I'll give you an example. Right now, the coalition, more than anything, is just bringing awareness that something different has to be done in order to break down the barriers and bringing people in, such as not asking for resumes, not asking for experience, shortening the application programs. So I can't speak specifically to what all employers are doing. I do know that the coalition is chomping at the bit to do more. And I will say that because this population, these 4.9 million youth that are out there, because employers do want to reach them, organizations, I'll give you an example, Chipotle, for instance. They realized at one point that almost 40% of their new hires were coming from Opportunity Youth, basically the age ranges for the most part. They took a look at their application process and looked at where the dropout rates were for people applying to Chipotle. Two biggest areas was when somebody was asked to upload their resume and when they were asked for experience. And they removed both of those things from their resume, so from their application. So that's just one example, but so many more companies are asking, and they're going to be asking many of the employers here or many of the community organizations here, why are people dropping off? What does it look like in your eyes in regards to youth just walking away saying it's not worth it because they do want to change? So that's part of the coalition. When I said wait to see what's happening over the next year, you never know. Those are some of the things that we're looking at. And I do know that assessments right now are a buzzword on the employer side in regards to yes, have them, no, not have them. And Kim, if you want to talk about the panel I guess we were on.
Yeah, so if any of you know the folks at Jobs First NYC, they just released a report called Online But Disconnected, which is about basically what happens when young people, it could be any young person, goes and fills out an online application that has a personality assessment. And the results are that young people get dropped off more quickly than folks in other age brackets, and for no good reason, essentially, for the personality assessments. And these are for reasons like, let's say that you don't have a personal computer at home and you have to do it in a library, and Dunkin' Donuts happens to have a 200-question application. You're going to time out before you can finish that application. So I really recommend Marjorie's report or the Jobs First report on this, and it's something that we're sharing really widely with employers, because I think if they want to access the talent that we all know is represented in Opportunity Youth, they have to change the way they ask questions, to your point, Kim.
And I will say just one thing with that. Yes. They just don't know what they don't know in regards to, wow, we do ask a 200. They're sitting in the room ready to give all the money, to all of the programs that we're doing, yet they're not realizing what's happening operationally, with the HR department. So I think it's collaboration on the employer's end as well as then connecting with us.
Yes, back there.
Yeah, hi, my name is Mary, and I work for Comcast, and across the company we have many different kinds of jobs that are connected to customer service, and we provide very intensive, very specific training, right, to our products, our services, how we as a company do things. But we are looking at a partnership with our community colleges. I'm actually based here in Colorado. We're looking at a partnership with our community colleges to offer some kind of training and certification course in some basic how to be a professional skills, so some basic how to be successful in a professional environment skills. So Felix, it could involve things like, what's a W-2? Or how do you think about your negotiating when it comes time to do that, or to think about health benefits? And my question, I have a couple questions for you all on this. Does taking a training course of that nature, does that make sense to you? Do you think, as you think about the youth would they do that? Would they value that? And if yes, what are the best ways to connect that kind of opportunity with youth who could benefit from it, and what makes that kind of a class easy for them and accessible for them?
Sure, I definitely think something like that would be awesome, and I definitely feel as though it's needed. Side note, I used to work at Comcast in the customer service arena when I was in college, so I really enjoyed my experience there. I felt as though like their whole onboarding and their training was awesome. I had the opportunity to actually go through a similar, not quite how to be a professional, but a variety of how to show up as a professional, a variety of soft skills training when I was serving as an AmeriCorps through Public Allies. I feel like not just myself, but my entire cohort, every week when we just had all-day professional development trainings, I felt as though we felt as though it was extremely beneficial and definitely impactful. I can say like I use those skills on a day-to-day basis. They've been very helpful to me as a professional and as I grow and try to figure out where I want to grow as a professional. And some of the I guess, more recent professional development opportunities that I felt as though were more so catered to opportunity youth and millennials, and they were successful, were more so like online modules type webinars where you had the opportunity to kind of tune in when was, I guess, what's the word? I can't think of the word, I'm so sorry. At the time, that just made the most sense for you. So I think having some type of online platform, webinar base, where you can kind of self-pace yourself is really, really key when you're talking about millennials and opportunity youth.
I think everything she just said, plus back to my original point, working with the workforce development programs that do it. A lot of times the workforce development programs don't know what you're looking for and can't specifically train a young person around that skill set. But I think that is a necessary piece. That's kind of what I preach all the time. Like those type of trainings are necessary, but it's more necessary for these companies and organizations to work with the people who work with this population. And I think community colleges is one thing, but the workforce development programs are like doing the work. They just need the information.
One thing I would just add as someone that sees a lot of training programs like that around the country is I think Felix maybe made the point of perhaps including a stipend of some kind, if depending on how long the course is, but realizing that these young people's times is valuable and helping to make that really a reality and an option for folks. And then the other piece I would say is making sure that your training is valuable in the marketplace. Like, will it help a young, by taking a training like that, are they more likely to get a job? Are they more likely to keep a job? Are they more likely to get promoted? And I think having some of that value proposition really clearly articulated and proven is also very important.
Another thing is making it marketable. BuzzFeed is very good at making clickbait, and instead of saying like, how can I say, customer service workshop, marketable skills in the workplace, and having free food stipend is always a good thing as well. Food is the good thing.
Food is everything. Stipend too.
Food is everything. Everybody wants to be fed, both in mind and body, and pocket.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. I see Dorothy and a couple of other hands around her. I'm just going to repeat the question in case folks didn't hear it. So Dorothy said, this question I think is for Marie, that a couple of, I think Ryan and Felix both brought up, have the 100,000 opportunities employers addressed the question around banning the box?
Good question. And it was last year when I was here that I even realized what banning the box meant, because at Chipotle they didn't have it. But what I did learn last year, again, sitting in the room with many employers, was that those that did ban the box, they were the cool people. Those were the cool employers in some regards, like, oh, wow, they did it, they did it, they did it. I had to ask again, what is banning the box and what does that mean? And it went back to background checks. It's still an ongoing conversation. More employers would like to, but it's bigger than recruitment and it's bigger than awareness, in regards to, yes, it's a good thing to do. There's so many other layers that need, within a company, that have to be checked off. And I'm just being fair to those employers because I know that they're out there. However, is it something that is talked about with employers? And are those employers that have banned the box, are they now reaching out to those that still have it? Absolutely. That's part of the convenings that we have, is to help others figure out how to do it. So we know it's important. We know that's a huge obstacle when it comes to hiring opportunity youth.
Other questions? Yes. And there's a couple back here.
Hi, Mel Polk from the city of Detroit. This is more a comment than a question. Marie, one of the things, let me tell you what we do. This summer we put, our official number was 8,127 young people to work. Of those, 2,056 were direct opportunity youth. Of that 2,000, 47 have been hired full-time in our partner businesses. I would suggest talking to employers about what I talk to them about, and that's to market their success. In the communities, if communities understand that a particular set of employers are willing to extend opportunities, are willing to work with youth who are challenged, whatever that challenge might be, the numbers will grow of participants because they'll begin to feel comfortable at least applying to them. And then as I have found, if you give a young person an opportunity and they succeed, you never know if they are head of household. And the benefits are not just for that young person. That's money that stays in the community, goes back into the community. It helps them, it helps the school system, it helps everybody in that area. But I would tell you that it's a simple thing. Market your success. You'd be surprised how far that would go.
That absolutely, and that's our goal, is to take those that have been successful. Again, when Chipotle changed their application, their application form, and they reduced the number of questions that were asked, their applications for Opportunity Youth went up by 15%. That was the story that I had them tell on an employer convening, so that would bring other employers in. So you're absolutely right. Also, the more stories that you have and the best practices that any of you can share with your relationships with employers as to what's working and the results as to what's working, that can go a long way. And I will give you my card because I want you to speak on the calls as well, so that we can get the word out.
Hi, thank you for your wisdom. I have a follow-up question to the Comcast colleague who was asking your input on what a training would look like to help you be better career ready and negotiators. My flip side of that is, what recommendations do you have for employers to be more diverse, conscious, inclusive? You all have talked about situations of classism. I work with LGBTQ young people experiencing homelessness. Repeatedly, I'm hearing situations of cisgenderism, racism, heteronormativity on behalf of employers. What does an allied employer look like? And could you give some suggestions around what those outcomes are, so that we can, as CBOs and institutions of higher learning, train people to meet that bar of expectations that will allow you all to feel respectful. This idea that 80% of you are looking for that, and 1 in 2 women and 2 in 5 men are being disrespected in their places of employment is absolutely unacceptable.
Changing HR and what HR looks like. Making sure that HR looks like the community, at least represents the community in a certain way or form. When you talk about sexism, you're talking about old white men that are stuck in their ways. When you're talking about queerism and that type of thing, you're talking about the same. So it's like just changing what that makeup look like, changing in some way, form, or fashion. If it's training the person up to work in HR and challenging that system, that's more of a systematic thing to me, though.
I agree with Ryan 100% with diversifying your hiring team and making sure that they're trained in cultural competency, because I heard the saying that you don't see color or differences until it's time to marry, call the police, or hire. And I think that is very, very true. That people don't see color until it comes, or differences, until it comes time to marry, call the police, or hire. And I think that's very true, that people tend to feel more comfortable with hiring and bringing on people into their team that they directly relate to, feel comfortable working with, or can identify with. So I think that having that cultural competency and, like Ryan said, diversifying your hiring team. I also think it's really important to be innovative when you're thinking about your whole hiring process, everything from application to the actual interview process. So for example, the whole 9 to 5 coming in for an interview might not work. Like for example, if you don't have advance notice, yeah, I can make it, if I get the job, but maybe something like, an online, interview platform might be, more, advantageous to someone like me, or, like some of the cool, examples you used about Chipotle and, shortening your application or even considering the ways you're looking at, non-traditional work experiences, the ways you, the qualifications, how the qualifications are talked about. A lot of people don't even apply for certain jobs just because you read the qualification box and you automatically say they're not even gonna look at my application. So just thinking about your hiring team and your hiring practices, I would say.
Diverse, making sure that your leadership is diverse as well. And what an ally looks like, it looks like everyone in this room, to be honest. Somebody who is willing to not only be a partner to young people, but who's willing to help us in our growth and development. And I want to say that I highly recommend talking to Ms. Dorothy about that, especially since we're all with OYU, and that's something that we also push for, is that we have allies as well as Opportunity Youth who is willing to push our movement, but also help in our own communities.
Another thing I was just thinking about right now, like I know a lot of people don't identify as male or female. Do we have to check that box off? Is there like something that we can add on to it, or like X? Because I know we're trying to be more diverse, and at the same time, I know a lot of people are still stuck in their old ways. So like hiring the person, but letting them know about the culture that is within the workspace, so he can be aware or she can be aware of what's going on before he gets hired. Because I know not everybody's gonna change their perspective or their ideas within a day or a night. But yeah, being aware. And also what she was saying, Skyping. I think that is such a good way to try to get a lot more interviews. And I know a lot of you don't have the opportunity to try to get online or have the means of transportation, but being more diverse to seeing how we can accommodate the youth to the skills that they have or the experience that they have, not just by the work history, but the experiences that they have at home. One thing that I like to say is like when you throw out the trash, that within itself, your mom gave you a direct objective and you went and accomplished it. That right there is a work experience. You were accountable, you did what you were supposed to, and threw out the trash. Later on, yeah, you're eventually gonna do it without your mom yelling at you or throwing the sandal, but you're eventually gonna do it. But just giving them the opportunity to be able to develop himself or herself as a professional so they can challenge themselves. Because I think a lot of us had a positive mentor even within our workspace that encouraged us and challenged us. Like, hey, you know what? I think you could do better. And just pushing us, like, go out there, you can do it. And just throwing yourself out there, you never know. You gotta flop like a fish before you land in the water, but you'll land it.
I think we had one more question. Is that right? Okay, back here, yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Juan Colon, and I'm from Hartford, Connecticut. It's a personal question, but also general. I hear you guys give your personal, aspects of getting into a workplace, not necessarily working there 10, 15 years plus, but in my case, I've been here for a year. I know what I want. I want to grow. I want to gain income. I want all of that. As you guys said, we are growing and we do have to pay bills. So if I'm outspoken about what I want and not being heard, and it's been a year, like you said, it takes time. It doesn't take overnight. So how would I go about, or how would the youth go about that situation? Do you have any personal aspects or professional aspects to go?
So I'm actually gonna go back and ask for a raise also. One thing's for sure is that Yeah, I know, right? One thing's for sure is the way that you market yourself and setting goals. Like, you know what? I could bring this to the business if you give me this opportunity. If you give me this raise or if you move me up positions, this is what I could bring. And this is what I'm here to offer. Like, I'm already doing it, but I know I'm not getting compensated for it, but I could do it much better if you give me this chance.
I would say two things. Do your homework and enlist the support of a mentor. And I mean do your homework in the sense of, is there someone at your organization who maybe started in a similar role as you? Is there someone who has the role that you're trying to get into or the salary range that you're trying to get into? And try to pick their brains as much as you can, like figure out what they did, what trainings they did, you know, who they talked to, you know, what negotiations they had to make in order to get to where they are. And the second thing was just the support of a mentor. I feel as though what's really helped me get prepared for conversations like that and just feeling confident in knowing my value and my worth and being confident about, you know, voicing what I want to do. I've been able to do that with the support of amazing mentors like Dorothy and Thaddeus. So.
Okay, just to go off of what Felix said, sorry about that. But I've voiced, you know, raises, you know, how I can potentially, you know, make the business better, you know, put my efforts all in, you know, 110%, not just 100, you know what I'm saying? Because I know my worths and I know exactly where I want to be at in a certain amount of time. So it's like, do I look for a different path, but specifically the same vision, or stay there and, you know, like you said, time will tell, or like, how would you go about that?
So one thing's for sure, like, you know, I had a lot of job opportunities even as a youth advocate now. It's pretty much just finding your mission, your goal. Are you sure that this organization or this place that you're working at aligning with your goals and your mission? And if it's not fulfilling you, I think you should look around, see what you can get as a chance to move up also. Like we were talking about negotiating. If you do get the next job, talk about like how can you move up and how fast can you move up and how fast would you get that raise, or what is it that you have to do to improve or present yourself to them so they can give you these opportunities. But me personally, I feel like, you know, if my job or my placement doesn't give me these opportunities, I will probably start looking around. But that's my personal advice. Like, you know, a lot of places that I have seen, they do just leave, but then you don't have a stable job afterwards. You know what I mean? I don't want you to make a drastic decision because what you're seeing. But one thing I do want you to know is that take as much information as you can from this job. Before you land your next job, you'll have a lot more experience than you can offer, and you'll probably get more of a raise or more wages.
Thank you so much. We're at time, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time here, and I know everyone has places to go, but will you just give all of our panelists a big round of applause? Thank you all so much. Have a great afternoon.
Yes.